In all the time that you've debated issues, have you ever come across one more divisive than Israel-Palestine?
Probably not.
Particularly in the last 8 months.
Yeah, I mean, probably not. There have been others. I mean, I was plastered on the front page of The Sun in 1990 for meeting Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness under the 42-point bold headline traitor. That was hot at the time, but who now would say that it was not right to have met and talked and brought in from the cold the leaders of what was an armed struggle within our own country. Jaw is definitely better than war, but it is an issue that separates the sheep from the goats, the wheat from the chaff. I personally believe that when history comes to be written, just as it was written over the Holocaust in the late 30s and 40s, those that turned their faces away from mass slaughter, even though they must have known that it was going on, have not emerged well from history. And I think the same will be true over this.
But I've started a lot of interviews with pro-Palestinian guests, and I'll do it with you. And it's been a sort of controversial thing. People have sort of mocked me for it, but I kind of think it's a good starting point that to go back to October the 7th, when you realise the scale of what had happened that day, do you condemn what happened that day?
Well, I have to first correct you on something. It was by no means the single biggest slaughter in the Israel-Palestine chapter.
In one day?
In one day. In fact, in 5 hours, with Sharon on the roof shining a searchlight into the Sabra and Shatila camps in Beirut, 3,850 Palestinian women and children. There were only women and children because the men had all agreed to sail away to Tunisia as part of an American brokered deal. Now, younger viewers will not remember Sabra and Shatila, but those two names are burned in the minds of those older and who care about it. So that's triple the actual death toll on October the 7th.
Well, nearly 7,000 more were wounded on October the 7th.
Yeah, but the fact that you thought, I mean, this respectfully, that this was the biggest single day of slaughter is part of the problem. The lives, the blood of Palestinians is oftentimes by commentators and politicians regarded as less valuable than the blood of Israelis. All the blood is a disgrace, all of it. And insofar as terrorist acts are committed by Palestinian organizations, by terrorists I mean the harming, killing of innocent civilians, of course I condemn that.
So do you accept, on that then, do you accept, because the number you gave for the other atrocity, which is what it was, is disputed, you know it's disputed. So
the Sabra Shatila?
Yeah, the actual toll is disputed.
Well, the death toll on October 7th is
Well, I know you dispute it, but there's more clarity about the numbers on that.
No, there isn't, because the Israeli media reports have not been reflected in Western reports. But the Israeli media all the time reports that significant casualties were inflicted by Israeli forces themselves, and deliberately under Netanyahu's Hannibal directive, which states that no one should be allowed to be taken hostage, kill them, rather than allow them to be taken hostage.
But over 230 were taken hostage.
Yeah, and taking women.
And the latest figures are that 1,143 people were killed in the initial series of terror attacks, 373 of whom were linked to security forces, 766 of whom were civilians. Now, you've questioned those before. Do you question those now?
No, I question who killed whom, but I don't eschew condemnation of the killing of innocent civilians. If you show me an old woman who was killed by a Palestinian fighter...
Well, they showed it themselves. I mean, they broadcast many of the atrocities to the world.
I absolutely condemn that. I also condemn the taking of women and children as hostages.
Right.
Whether they're taken by the Israeli government, and there are 9,000 hostages in Israeli dungeons that are untried, not even charged. They're just held there as hostages. and I condemn the holding of civilian hostages
And do you think
in
what
Gaza.
do you think what Hamas did that day was a terrorist attack?
Well, the parts that I'm talking about were undoubtedly a terrorist attack. Killing innocent civilians, whether on London Bridge or on the London Underground or at a music festival, are terrorist acts because they are punishing innocent people for the crimes of guilty people. Now, I was underground as an agent of the ANC in apartheid South Africa. I was working for Nelson Mandela's ANC. I gave my blood on the floor of the Guguletu police station in Cape Town. Was the ANC a terrorist organization? The answer to that is no, even though they had people who carried out terrorist attacks. You have to understand the whole picture and not just a tiny corner of a single snapshot. The ANC, like the Palestinians, are fighting against an apartheid state. In the case of Palestine, the millions of Palestinians scattered around the world with no one speaking up for them. And from time to time...
When people categorize what Hamas did on October 7th as resistance, do you think that's an acceptable choice of word for what happened that day?
If you're fighting against occupation forces, undoubtedly it is. So if you cross the wire, break out of the wire of the concentration camp, it was David Cameron, I remind you, who called it the largest open-air prison camp in the world. If you break through and you start taking a toll on your guards, the people who've kept you in this absolute immiseration, penury, with regular death being dealt to you, then that's a legitimate act of resistance.
But it's not legitimate to attack kids and grandmothers.
I already said that.
No, that's what I mean.
But
that's why I mean.
Yeah.
Some people try to describe what Hamas did that day as resistance.
No, killing grandmas and kids is terrorism.
It's not resistance.
It's not resistance.
Right.
It's terrorism.
That's my point.
But killing soldiers and security officers of the Israeli state is enshrined in international law. When you used the phrase earlier about Israel having the right to defend itself, it literally does not have the right. That's not to say that the resistance fighters who are now taking a heavy toll on Netanyahu's invaders, very heavy. It's now 9 months. They still haven't quashed the resistance in these camps.
Well, they're not going to defeat Hamas in its entirety.
No, and some have acknowledged
and they certainly,
that.
in my opinion, the massive flaw with this strategy, I think they are fueling, not ending the ideology.
For sure.
I can't imagine that the amount of bloodshed of civilians we've seen is not going to inspire a lot more people to embrace the revenge ideology that Hamas have represented.
Didn't we discover that ourselves in our own country? When we interned, without trial, thousands of Roman Catholics in the north of Ireland, we guaranteed the struggle of the Irish Republican Army for decades afterwards. We made a university for them behind the wire. This kind of failure to address legitimate grievances of people can only generate future hatred.
See, I believe fundamentally every Palestinian should have exactly the same human rights and freedoms as every Israeli.
Me too.
Right?
Me
On
too.
that we agree.
Me too.
Right, the question is...
And within one state it will have to be, because the two-state solution, which I supported as an Arafatist, I look foolish now, having supported the Oslo Agreement. I look like an idiot.
Why?
Arafat looks like an idiot. Because we believed that there would be a two-state solution. And almost 40 years after the agreement, there's not 1 centimetre of Palestine free. And Gaza is in complete ruins. The West Bank is on fire. Settlers are running amok. The attempt to ethnically cleanse the West Bank and East Jerusalem is running concurrently with the slaughter in Gaza. So where are you going to put two states?
We are where we are now. How does this get resolved? And how long will it take?
I don't think it's going to be resolved, and therefore cannot give a timescale. There's never going to be a two-state solution until, a surgeon can't operate on his own foot. Until outside surgeons operate on this, it's not going to be resolved. as long as we keep giving Israel
When you see
money.
the Abraham Accords, you see normalization of relations with Arab countries and Israel. You see that Saudi clearly want to pursue the same path. Is that not ultimately the way it has to go?
How will that help resolve the Palestinian issue?
Well, the question then is who will help rebuild and govern the people in Gaza after this? And that is a question which is open for a lot of debate. I mean, there's no easy answer, clearly, but what do you think?
You call it normalization, but there's nothing normal about these regimes that concluded under Trump's browbeating and bribery and the judicious deployment of his son-in-law. There's nothing normal about these countries. Their populations, 99.99% of them, are with the Palestinians and are against this normalization. This is a Potemkin village. And even Trump, I think, will not seek to resurrect the Abraham Accords. The Oslo Accords are dead. The Abraham Accords never got off the ground because none of them have solved the fundamental problem of Palestinian statehood, of the return of the Palestinian refugees to their own land, their own homes, for which they have the title deeds written in English and countersigned and sealed with a stamp by British judicial authorities. I say it again, you nor I would ever accept anyone stealing our house. And no matter how long they live there, it will never be theirs. It will always be mine.
I don't think there's any incentive for Netanyahu to bring an end to any warfare at the moment.
No, that's
because
right.
The moment it is, all the polls suggest the Israeli people will kick him out of office. And then the next phase of his life will be in a court facing corruption charges.
Sure.
So I don't see any future after this war ends for Netanyahu or more of that cabinet. But I don't see any future for Hamas either in having any form of governing over the people of Gaza. Do you?
I don't think they care about governing.
But do you think they should have any
I think
governing
the
role?
Palestinians should pick their leaders, not Piers Morgan or George Galloway.
Let me ask you, you were very critical of Sir Keir Starmer, likely to be the new British Prime Minister in several weeks' time. You warned that he would pay a high price for his stance on this war. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think that millions of people who almost certainly would have trooped out to vote Labour very loyally or even holding their nose will not now do so. Millions of those are Muslims, but millions of them are not. If you look at any protest, demonstration, manifestation of any kind, it's mainly non-Muslims that are there. It's mainly young people, students. It's mainly people that Jeremy Corbyn would once have had in his coalition. And by the way, Corbyn will get more votes, got more votes in 2017 than Starmer's going to get in 2024.